We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to Pod Maverick. This is Kirk Henderson, joined, I would normally say as always, but for the first time in a little bit, Josh Bowe. We're editors at Mavs Moneyball. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing the best that I can from a new secrete location. Secrete, that's not the word I use. But I haven't talked into a microphone for a few weeks, but yeah, I'm here. I've got a new webcam. I don't know if it looks better. You laughed when I first hopped on, so I'm assuming it looks. Huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the summary of what has transpired in the last few weeks is there's not a summary. Josh is in between different locations, and by the time the season kicks off, everything will be sorted out. We will be back to normal, and Josh will have light on his face at some point during podcast. But tonight, we decided to sacrifice video quality for content of a podcast because we just haven't talked in a little while. I have filled the space with some friends. And then, we were lucky enough today to kind of have the floodgates open in a real way because it was Media Day. And Media Day is one of those things where, depending on the outlook for the season, it can be very kind of weird, or in today's case, really almost like joyful, is how I would describe the scene on hand. It looked like all the Mavericks, even Luka, who is kind of gripey about his media obligations, seemed just really excited to get back at it. And it, if you were bullish on the Mavericks before, and I would of course understand why, I bet after today's, kind of commentary, some of the one-on-ones that like Luka did with Mark Stein, and then that Klay did with the Locked On Mavs gents, not to mention, just their general press conferences. There's just a lot. There's a lot. And I'm excited.
Yeah, I guess that's what happens when you're coming off a finals appearance and you accomplish pretty much all of their offseason goals. I mean, if you think about what they were trying to attempt, they did it. Klay Thompson was their number one priority. They got him. They knew if they wanted to get Klay, they'd probably have to sacrifice Derrick Jones Jr., and they got his replacement, Najee Marshall. They turned Josh Green and Tim Hardaway Jr. into Quentin Grimes, basically his kind of did it. I mean, they got everything they wanted, if you think about it. So that combined with the finals appearance, everyone's healthy. Yeah, I can understand why they were in a good mood. Luka was cracking jokes during his appearance, which
is weird because I mean he is always professional about media stuff, but he doesn't like it. Like he
Yeah.
does, like that's him. There's a lot of NBA guys that are like this. He's not, but he seemed just genuinely kind of excited to be back in things. He looked great. And there's a lot of stuff that I think we could kind of hop into. And I think that I think the best bet is really just to dive right in, and then as other things come up, maybe from the last few weeks. But honestly, that's the dirty secret of for you to have you picked. There is no ideal time to go MIA when you run any when you do make stuff like Josh and I do, but like there's been nothing to talk about. Like really nothing. So
I know.
I
really picked my family crisis at an extremely fortunate time for them.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's like right before, and that's what Josh and I say this. We try not to harp on it too much, but it's like we do this kind of in addition to everything else in our lives, and of course, we're not alone in that. Everybody else that does this, that doesn't do it as their main job is doing it in addition. I would argue that the fact that like we are the only two that I like. My children are at difficult ages. Like my 8-year-old just can't not get in trouble. It's really remarkable. He goes like 6 hours and is in trouble. It's fantastic. Like right before the podcast, he's in trouble. And I'm like, please stop. And I hurt myself from carrying my Nikola Jokic sized baby. So that's the other thing. All right, let's just kind of jump right into the media appearances. Last thing before we start, those of you who were nuts enough and diehard enough to watch this live, I can't emphasize enough. Like there are people on the internet being like, this is taking forever. What's going on? Why is Kyrie talking so much? Wrap it up. Where is Najee Marshall? What's going on? Welcome to the life of a media member, because that is like the
that's
job
all you do.
Oh my gosh. Like that's why the guys who go to games, it's a 5 to 6 hour ordeal every time you go to a Mavericks game in person as a media member. There's just like, you just wait forever.
Especially pro. The lower levels, it's actually easier because there's not as much kerfuffle. Everyone's just kind of ready to get out of there. Pro, you're on the players' time because they are millionaires and they will come out when they will come out.
And the Mavericks, at least as the year went on, they actually got worse about this. I hope they get back into it. But the Mavs PR team had a tendency to pump out, transcriptions of highlights of the media appearances post-game. With Kyrie Irving and Spencer Dinwiddie, that is impossible. Those two men speak like politicians. They say so much and say nothing. It's really funny whenever you hear them answer at length. Anyway, let's hop right into it then. Do you want to kick us off? Because I made you write the rundown since my brain is mashed potatoes.
No, that's fine. Let's start with Jason Kidd. We'll just go down the list of kind of. I just picked the keyest, the big names that talk today. So I don't have Quentin Grimes on our list. I'm sorry, but we might get to him if we have enough time. But we'll start with Jason Kidd, and I kind of just plucked the most interesting things that they said. Also, take everything for granted. It is media day, and professional sports teams are not always honest with the media when they want to reveal their plans. So don't hold anyone's feet to the fire for what they say during media day when it doesn't happen in the first opening night of the regular season.
Right.
But so having said that, some of the interesting things Kidd said basically confirmed, we have 3 locked in starters. Didn't name them, but you can take much to guess. That is Klay, Kyrie, and Luka. Then made kind of some interesting comments about, they said that we have a lot of starters. We are going to instigate competition in training camp is the direct quote. Said Dereck Lively will start to opening training camp, but said both him and Daniel Gafford will have opportunities to start. I believe Kidd was quoted as saying opportunities to start outside of injuries, like irregardless of injury concerns. So 2 things. Obviously, he didn't want to reveal the full starting lineup to start training camp, which I mean, you could say is interesting or not. We can kind of assume what that starting lineup is going to be. And then 2, kind of confirmed what we talked about during the playoffs and during our offseason pods with Lively being the starter, which we both were like, we understand the run the team went on when Gafford was inserted in the starting lineup, but this Lively has to start. Like he is the third most important player on the team. I think both of us argue, and at times rises up to number 2 in levels of importance and impact in winning that we saw during the playoffs. So I think that's, me and you were both like, he has to start. And so I guess it's good to hear Kid kind of, confirm how we felt about his importance to where this team wants to go. Like he has to be a starter. He has to be nearing 30 minutes a game. Like he's that important.
I think you got to pair as many minutes as possible with Luka.
Yeah.
Both for defensive reasons, for protecting Luka and the rim, but also getting the most out of Lively. I think that the other point guards on the team are probably going to have fun playing with Lively as well. Spencer is in my opinion, kind of an underrated passer. We think of him more for his scoring with the Mavericks, but he's an interesting assist guy. Kyrie, I just don't know how much he's going to have going on in terms of running the offense, just because, Kyrie, we'll get to Kyrie in a little bit, but I just think they have to be careful with his usage. It's interesting. There's just the fact that there's this many possibilities, and I'm not sure if you happen to listen. Oh, hey, Kevin Gray Jr. in the chat. Say hello to Kevin, everyone. He's over there at DLLS running their daily show. The concept of a daily show makes me tired in advance, even though we ended up doing, I don't know, 3/4 of the week once the season starts. But I'm just, this season seems to be about coming up with solutions in lineups instead of patching holes. Like the Mavericks have so many different ways to attack problems. They're not the way I see the line, like everything on paper, is they're going to be able to attack problems with different options as opposed to having to hide shit. And that's incredible to me. Like that hasn't happened for me. Obviously the 2011 championship team, but really like my brain goes back to like the 2004 Dallas Mavericks, like the team that should have made the Western Conference Finals. So it's really fun to have this much optionality. Someone was asking me, who do I think was going to play in different roles? And it's like, really, when you go through the lineup, they just have so many different types of guys, and that's really fun.
Yeah, if everyone on paper produces to the way that you would expect, like relative to expectation, I mean, they've got what, a legit shot at a 10-man rotation during the regular season.
So.
Yeah, and that, if everyone stays healthy and there's no unexpected slumps, it's pretty crazy. And I think, not to jump ahead, but PJ Washington, they asked what one word to describe the team, and he said versatile. And I think, on the money with what you're saying is like, you think about Najee Marshall and Quentin Grimes as backups, and they could probably be close to starting, maybe not on a playoff team, but there's definitely some other teams in the league that they could be starters on. Absolutely. And like, go ahead.
It comes back to, if, the Mavericks made Derrick Jones Jr., who was if you thought that Derrick Jones Jr. was a key signing when he was the 15th guy that was pulled in last, whenever the heck it was when he was signed, I would consider you either a liar or like the ultimate prognosticator. And these guys are different than him for sure, but there's so many different guys that Luka can help elevate. And so, are they necessarily starters on, some of the other top teams in the East and the West, Najee Marshall and Grimes, for example? I don't know. But I think on this team, Luka elevates everyone around him and raises that floor to where it's like, yeah, I really do think the kid's going to try. We're going to have a problem. And I mean this in a good way. We're going to have a problem with 5-man lineup analysis, because I think there's going to be a whole lot of shallow data where we get all kinds of different combinations for the first 30 games of the year.
There are definitely going to be some camps of people that are like, this 5-man unit should be closing. This one should be starting. Why isn't he going to this?
Very strong opinions. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. And I think the theme of what they did this offseason, and what all the players related in the training camp, what you're just saying, is you could tell with Nico, his goal, if you want to like delineate between the Nico regime and the previous regime in terms of how they want to build a basketball team, it is versatility because when you think about how the Mavericks were building a team before Nico got here, it was a lot was predicated on, well, Luka does so much that we can kind of cheat the margins and pay for less because Luka makes up the difference. We can get these highly specialized one skill players because Luka's so good that we don't, it seemed like the philosophy was we don't need that much more. We're going to save our money for a star, and if it's not a star, we're gonna work the margins to get these specialized players, and then Luka will paper over the rest. And I obviously had, both of us, I think, I don't want to speak for you, but obviously I had some very passionate responses to that way of roster building, to say the least. But I understood why they did it, because on paper it makes sense. And I mean, they made the playoffs for a majority of Luka's tenure. So it did sort of work, but that always put like a cap on how high you could go, because we know like the NBA is a talent league. Like it is a chalk league. Like when was the last time a non top 3 or top 4 seed won a title? Like the NBA, the best teams win, like the most talented teams always win. And yeah, the Miami Heat is an 8 seed, made the finals a couple of years ago, but the Nuggets, the 1 seed, still pulverized. Like you might get some fluky runs, but the team that wins a championship is usually the team that has a lot of talent. We just saw the Celtics do that against the Mavericks. And I feel like this shift in Nico's roster building and the new front office has been, let's get more guys that can do more things. Like you look at a Najee Marshall, who's replacing essentially Derrick Jones Jr., probably not as good as a vertical athlete, maybe not as good as a off-ball shot blocking steals guy. But in terms of his game, he's a better dribbler, better passer, probably, I don't know if he's a more consistent shooter, but I think he's a better shooter. Like and he can still defend. Like he's more well-rounded. You look at Quentin Grimes, maybe he doesn't have Josh Green's, inventive, creative passing, but he's more consistent play-to-play defensive.
Way more confident of a player. Yeah. Way more confident.
More consistent of a three-point shooter. Like they got guys that you feel like you can rely on possession to possession more, that don't need Luka necessarily hand-feeding them every single opportunity on offense as well. And that's kind of what I took away from, this offseason, and that's what I take away from Nico's roster-building philosophy. And I think that's kind of what was the main point emphasized during training camp, or during the media day, was that this roster has a versatility and is more well-rounded maybe than what last season's was, despite last season being a very good roster, being very athletic. They might have taken a step back in athleticism, but I think they gained some more skill without dropping off too far. Like they're still an athletic team.
Sure. I mean, Derrick Jones Jr. is a rarefied athlete. It's you lose him, that's just kind of written in. Now we've been talking kind of kid opening the presser, or media day, talking about stuff, and the one that got like multiple like combination eye roll, chuckle, like kind of Jason Kidd, but it was a great question where I think it might have been Tim Cato asking who would in the starting lineup get the toughest defensive assignment. And he responded with Luka, why not? Kid ended up saying it'll be a committee, but he adds, in all seriousness, there are nights that Luka will have to guard someone. And if you look at, so this is year 4 of Jason Kidd. If you scrap year 2, last year was a big step in the correct direction for holding Luka accountable within the framework of the team structure defensively, particularly after the trade. And Luka did play better defense last year. There's simply no question about that. Anyone who will continue to point to Luka's defensive kind of in the playoffs is being intellectually dishonest about his physical capabilities. Meaning he was hurt, and it was very obvious he was hurt. And in hindsight, it almost looks glaring, whereas I just kind of got used to it and sort of, I'm sure I said some shit which made people super angry, but it's the sense of he is hurt. I get it, but I don't want to just constantly talk about him being hurt. Now with hindsight in mind, I can sort of discuss it a little more rationally and say, I expect him to play better defense this year from start to finish, because the Mavericks have to. him being a more locked in player on the defensive end will help around the edges and will also help them secure wins. His numbers will always be bananas, but he just has to guard a little more. And if he does it, exerts a little more effort on the defensive end, then the Mavericks, I think, will be, that 5% better that we're talking about in terms of, in terms of making a playoff run, or, at least playoff seeding.
Yeah. And I mean, he's right. Like, if they're going to start Klay, Luka, Kyrie, which we all like, that's what they're going to do, right? I mean, he's going to have to guard someone, right? Because they just can't. Because if the other two starters are presumably PJ Washington and Dereck Lively, you're not going to have PJ Washington guard point guards. Like, he's going to have to take on some tougher perimeter assignments if they want to start those big three together consistently. So, and we've seen him do it. We even saw him with the injury in the last playoff run have some really, really good defensive possessions. I know that there was a lot of defensive lowlights on the highlight reels and talk shows on the next day. But there were also I can also pick out moments where he was really, really good. And I think a lot of it is, like you said, he's really strong. Like, he's strong and he has good footwork. Like, so it's there. It's more, to me, it's less about does he have the chops to be a good defender, because he clearly does. Like, he's a smart enough player. He's strong, which is, like, I think an under-discussed part of basketball perimeter defense nowadays is, like, yeah, he's not the quickest guy, but, like, being strong makes up for a lot of things. But the big thing is he's never going to be a high tier defender if they don't manage his workload on offense better, because no one can be a good defender if they have his offensive workload. The
That's
list
true.
is basically like LeBron. And
but to me, I mean, and this is kind of a bigger discussion that I think we'll continue to get into in the first part of the season. Some of that is him relinquishing the offensive workload. The usage with the talent on this team, he has to give up some of it. He doesn't need to have the ball 35% of the time when you got other guys like this. But we'll talk about that more. I'm very interested in that. Luka was actually the next guy up, and I made comments to this earlier, but I just like seeing him look excited made me excited, because Luka is not good about hiding his disdain. And there are just points in the season when he's over it. I want to say it was our man Panda Hank. Gosh, what's the word that Luka uses? Like, Luka can only answer. I got to go find this because this really made me laugh. This is just great podcasting. Panda Hank pointed this one out, and it really, really got me. Where did this go? This is the worst. This is not good podcasting. Why did I do it this way?
No. Is it from today?
No, it's like Luka answered. Like, okay, Luka says amazing all the time.
Oh,
that's what it is. Thank you, Kay. Luka is it's like that's his descriptor of choice was amazing. And Panda Hank made the joke that he went with unbelievable today to describe stuff, and I'm like, we're in a good spot. Luka's using different words. So that element of this made me laugh. He gave when asked one word to describe the season: championship. That's the goal. Locked in from the start. Wouldn't expect anything different. Not a newsworthy kind of quote by any stretch, but I think that there's this perception that's not fair that Luka wants his numbers, that he doesn't care about winning, and that is just stupid. I don't know how to say it, and I don't like calling other people stupid per se, but like, Luka cares about winning more than anything. He doesn't. I mean, just watch him in the Olympics, watch him in the qualifiers. Like, some of the things that he plays through to keep trying to win. I will not question the man's intent. And so the fact that he seems to be locked in, that is unbelievable. I'm looking forward to seeing him play again.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm looking forward to seeing, like we said, I'm curious because he did make some steps with that, the workload last season. And then in the playoffs, it kind of reared its ugly head in that finals loss. And this is the most talented roster he's had since he's been in Dallas. So there's not as many, they've got options now. So if it's still that way, then we can have that conversation later. But yeah, I can see why he's excited. He's got as many tools and weapons as he's ever had before in his NBA career.
Well, and then the next two guys on our rundown are probably the most interesting to me. And I think Klay Thompson is easily the most interesting person, just because he's the highlight signing, and he's Klay Thompson. He's a Hall of Famer. He's won 3 championships. Like, the guy is a true
4 championships.
4?
Yeah, right.
Maybe you're right. Who cares? He's amazing.
Okay.
He's played a ton of basketball and is transferring teams at a unique time in his career. You know, he came off 2 different potentially career-ending injuries and played the last 2 seasons, played a lot of minutes, a lot of games, and there's a lot of questions about what he can't do. And I am frankly just more interested in what he can do. You know, I think that his sort of defensive problems may get exposed at bad times, but the Mavericks, he just turns the Mavericks into, they should be an offensive juggernaut. And, you know, watching him talk to Nick and Isaac, you know, it was a little, those interviews that they do were always a little interesting to me, in that I wonder, it's just like it's a podcast. It's like a one-on-one where these guys, and it seems like Klay didn't particularly seem, he seemed a little nervous, which was, I mean, adorable in one sense, but it's just, this guy has played basketball for a really long time at the professional level, and he seems just kind of itching to get going. And that was exciting to see. You know, he gave, he talked about Kyrie and the organization's pitch to him joining. He talked about Luka Doncic, you know, in the pick and roll and some of the things. And I think, you know, the scuttlebutt from him, from my Warriors people that I know, like, that was an ugly ending. Okay.
Yep.
Just,
you know, I mean, it was like a messy, like, long after a long-term marriage ending in divorce or something, you know, like, it was, there's too much. Like, when you consider how long he'd been there and what they'd been through, that's a lot of stuff to come to a head, right? So yeah, it was messy, and a lot of it was based around him thinking he's one player, still one type of player, and the Warriors thinking he's not. He was very clearly frustrated about being in and out of the starting lineup, his role, his spot in the rotation. And, you know, he's been very honest today. Media Day was very much like he wanted a fresh start. He was looking forward to being happy about basketball again. Like, he didn't directly kind of say some things, but he pretty much has confirmed all the reporting that's been going on for like the last 6 months, where it was like he was unhappy with the Warriors. He was unhappy with the way that his role had played out, and he wanted something different. He wanted something new. He wanted maybe more appreciation for his play and appreciation of his game or some sort. You know,
in hindsight, it's going to just simply look like an ugly breakup, because the Warriors treated him very well, paid him a lot of money, and he wanted to be continually treated that way as he was becoming less effective. It's not a good basketball decision for the Warriors. With the Mavericks, he's making less money. He has a different role. Now, I am going to be very interested to see how the combination Luka Doncic, Jason Kidd, Kyrie Irving, 3 well-respected basketball figures, help maintain Klay Thompson's intent this season. They need to get a lot out of Klay, but Klay is also, Klay is kind of a skeleton key that opens up a lot of different stuff. But I also think that they're going to have to go away from him at some points during the year. He's not going to be a 70-game guy that the Mavericks need every night. They just have a lot of talent. They don't need him every night, is what I'm getting at. I think that should be good for his usage and for his longevity, and so, that sort of thing. And I'm fascinated to see how it turns out, because a lot of what he did in the final year there, it just wasn't great. It wasn't great. And he needs a fresh start. And I think he seems excited about that fresh start. And, the defensive questions will probably linger, but he's not getting any shorter. The Mavericks are an enormous team. That's like one thing I kind of keep circling back to. The Warriors were not. They were playing a 6'9" center a lot of the time with long reach. The Mavericks have multiple guys that can protect the rim in a way that's going to help Klay Thompson out a lot.
You could argue they have 2 of the top 5 rim protectors in the league.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And that's just, it's very different than some of the, Draymond Green, obviously a generational all-time defensive player, but different. It's just,
Right.
it's very like this is going to be very unique on both ends of the ball, because then Klay talks about it himself about how he's going to have to adjust to these guys. But that said, I think I mentioned this earlier with Luka needing to scale back his usage. There's still plenty of opportunity for a guy like Klay Thompson to get his points and also play a role in the offense that will help kind of make the Mavericks indefensible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to harp on it, because I know that's what we talked about all offseason, but like the silliness of like, how is Klay, Klay's not going to fit with that ball dominant Dallas offense, and everyone just memory holding the fact that Tim Hardaway Jr. had literally the best years of his career in Dallas next to Luka. The fact that like they could just slide Klay right, like, yeah, they're not the Warriors in terms of ball movement, but they also were able to utilize Tim Hardaway Jr., who's a significant, this isn't even a disrespect to Tim, but he is a significantly less talented player than Klay offensively in terms of shooting the ball. And the Mavericks were able to get some fantastic high volume 3-point shooting out of him.
Mm-hmm.
So why can't they get the, like Klay sliding into that role? Like he should only do better because Tim left some meat on the bone.
Tim is one of those Mavericks I'm going to look back with fondly. I mean, I'm really delighted about the fact that we don't have to discuss that his father went on multiple podcasts talking about how he should have played in the finals. Glad we don't have to talk about Tim anymore. I'm going to miss Tim, but Tim had his ups and downs, and Klay is simply a better player.
Yeah. So. And he does all the things Tim did, but just does them better. He's a better shooter. He's a better off-ball mover. He's better mid-range shooter.
Well, there was the thing that sticks out with me with Klay was some of the pick and roll stuff that he did with the Warriors. My friend Jared Dubin showed that way back during the trade, and it's like he is a very underrated offensive player. I think teams and people are still like, oh well, his shooting's not as great as it once was. Blah blah.
Still awesome.
It's still awesome. Like the catch and shoot stuff that he gets, like his catch and shoot metrics are amazing. And he's going to get more of those opportunities. But also, if he's able to work pick and rolls with different Mavericks players, I mean, that's the thing that I think is sort of like Steve Kerr ran a different offensive system. Okay. Obviously, it's more predicated on off-ball movement and that sort of thing. But I'm looking forward to seeing what Klay can do in some of these more, these 2 and 3 man sets that the Mavericks run that the Warriors seem to do some of, but not a ton. So it's just the offensive possibilities for Klay are I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. I mean, the Warriors ran a lot of off-ball stuff because their 2 best offensive players were Klay and Steph, which you could argue are like the 2 best off-ball stars of all time in a way. Like, no, Steph is a 1 of 1 in terms of like how an MVP player plays. Like you just don't see a lot of guys like that. So yeah, he hasn't been in a heavy pick and roll scheme before, but I mean, there's positives to that too. Like, yeah, people want to look at the negatives and be like, oh yeah, he's moving around a lot, but also is that a bad, like Klay standing around is not necessarily a bad thing because he's one of the greatest floor spacing spot up shooters ever for a guard and for his size. I mean, he's a guard, but he's like pretty big. He's like 6'7", 6'6", however tall he is. Like, it's not a bad thing if he's sitting in the corner for a few possessions with Luka and Kyrie running pick and roll. I mean, to be honest, that could be a way to help sustain Klay's physical fitness throughout a long 82 game season. Like not having to run through 4 screens every other possession. Like he gets to chill in the corner for a couple of possessions and still be effective because the team has such dominant isolation and pick and roll players. Like it's a give and take. Like the Mavericks are going to have to look at what they did with Tim Hardaway and why that was successful. Utilize that. Look at what Klay did and make sure that stuff comes over. Like, yes, they should not have Klay just sit in the corner the whole time, but also he does need to sit in the corner because the Mavericks still have a great pick and roll team with two great pick and roll players. Like, it's going to be a give and take. And I think that's a good thing because the Mavericks need to diversify a little bit of what they do. And I think adding in Klay is going to kind of force them to do that in a good way, in a healthy way, and in a way that I think they can do it because, again, they utilized Tim Hardaway Jr. in a way that made him the most successful he's ever been in his career. So I feel like they're going to be okay with Klay is kind of what I'm saying. Like, they're going to find a way to make this work. I think. Like, I just don't see, like, all the questions are going to be about the defense to me. Like, offensively, right. This should be a slam dunk unless something catastrophic happens with Klay.
Well, we're a little past the halfway point. Me kind of rambling at the beginning resulted in a longer podcast. Sorry about that. But now I'm going to take a quick minute to make my every podcast pitch, where if you are not subscribed to this show, please consider subscribing to Pod Maverick. We're on YouTube. We are on your every podcast feed imaginable. We're going to really, ramp up our coverage here in a little bit. I just decided to make, after that finals run, I was just sick. And so I scaled back probably at a time when we really should have kept pushing. But hey, here we are. We're going to go again. We're going to, on our YouTube page, we're trying to get to 5,000 for the end of the season. We're at like 3,300. So I think that's something we might be able to do. If you're listening on audio podcasts, please feel free to, leave us a review. We always appreciate that sort of thing. You can find our email relatively easily. And I answer, and talk to just about anybody about basketball. We'll be starting up our secondary live shows at some point. I just need to kind of get back in the flow, and then it will become second nature to me. All right, I'm going to insert some audio ads here. Go ahead and listen to those. That's what helps get Josh and I paid, and then we will be right back to talk about a few more players and get on out of here.
What's up, everybody? It's Heisman Trophy winner Matt Leinart. I've got a podcast called Throwbacks with actor Jerry Ferrara, where we'll be talking all things sports, but also so much more. We'll give you the behind-the-scenes stories from my days as the quarterback on an iconic college football team to Jerry's days as a star on an iconic TV series. So subscribe to Throwbacks wherever you download your podcasts and follow us on all social media at Throwback Show.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
All right, thank you so much for waiting. So we got, the funniest for me was people seeing today how verbose Kyrie Irving is in every possible situation. Like, it was great. Like, you can't even pick, there's just some word salad with him and Spencer that make me laugh, because they're clearly, when they're in good moods and when they're giving these long quotes, it's great. But man, it's like they also do this when things are bad. And like, that's my going back to my comments about Spencer being kind of a difficult coworker when things are crappy. But man, I got a kick out of hearing Kyrie again. We finally got the full download about, what happened to his hand, the healing, and how well, like he described, kind of that being, somebody said in the group chat today, Kyrie Irving is the only person in the world who'd be happy about a broken hand. But he's Kyrie's a slight guy, so him getting some rest is probably extremely important for him.
Yeah, I mean when he's on the floor, like, one thing about Kyrie is, say what you will about his deficiencies, maybe defensively, like, he goes hard. Like, he plays pretty hard for his size. He gets bumped around a lot. Like you said, he's a small guard, and the longevity physically of players of his profile is not necessarily great, even though he's in great condition. Like, it's nothing against him. It's just
right.
Small guards have an uphill battle for longevity. Chris Paul is kind of an outlier. So yeah, like, he was nicked up last season. He's had injury concerns every season. So yeah, it is kind of weird to say like broken hand is good, but it did just get him off his feet. And
Mhm.
like, he's not a kind of guy where like, I don't worry about him being off his feet for 2 months. Like for him, it's probably a good thing to rest, because he's had so many lower body injuries over the last, his whole career.
I mean, his whole career is just like
Even
filled.
at Duke, he had lower body injuries, like
Yeah.
knee injuries, ankle injuries, so foot injuries. So yeah, that's, if him being as physically fit and fresh as possible is key. And that's another thing, Luka reducing his workload, but also if they don't have to, they don't have to rely on those two guys as hard as they did the last 18 to 24 months. That's a win for both to keep, because both of those guys have, even Luka, like as young as he is, he's had some injury. He's had some nicks and bumps and bruises for a couple of years now. Like can they get through a season healthy? Like that would be
Well, so you remember Luka got hurt December, and Kyrie ended up playing a ton. Like Kyrie played probably like his best 5 to 7 game stretch, I would argue, of his career at one point in January, where he was just out of his mind. And so to watch him struggle, he seemed just to have a hard time at points in the playoffs figuring out when to exert himself. And you shared, at least in our rundown here, he had he indicated that he felt like that this last year wasn't necessarily his best at attacking the rim. And Kyrie attempts some really crazy difficulty level shots. Like his at the rim numbers are always much lower than what your brain tells you they are, because he makes such wild shots. And I just think you sort of have to accept the occasional blah performances at the rim from him, because he makes up for it with amazing finishes at other points. So it's, as long as he's willing to attack, and I think that's what he drove Mavs fans crazy, is he just was so willing to only do it in these 2 and 3 minute spurts. That's just, what it comes down to for me. I mean, I have zero complaints about Kyrie's season last year. He was exactly what the Mavericks needed from a second option. And if he's able to balance that out a little more this year with the different optionality that the team has, again, all the better, because they just need these guys to stay healthy. I mean, 60 games of Kyrie Irving would be pretty exciting for me.
Oh yeah, for sure. They just need him upright, because the season really felt like it was like Kyrie getting hurt, and one of those injuries wasn't even his fault. Teammate landing on his leg.
Right.
That's has nothing to do with him at all. But remember when he was out and Luka basically had to play Superman for the whole month of December to keep the Mavericks afloat. And I feel like that just kind of zapped Luka, even by the time Kyrie came back.
Mm-hmm.
Like that just put so much of a workload on Luka. That minutes and usage eventually caught up to him, I felt like, by the end of the year. So yeah, they got to figure out a way to keep both those guys upright consistently. Like they're going to miss some games, even if just how the league is right now.
Right.
And that's just the way they play. They're both pretty physical players. But yeah, Kyrie's rim rate last year was about 14% in terms of his percentage of total shots at the rim. I'm looking at it on Basketball Reference right now. For his career, that number is about 22%. He's been, his last season when he was with the Mavs, it was about 18. His last full season in Brooklyn was about 19.
But the rim rate doesn't bother me. It's the percentage finishing. Like he's not, the rim rate with this Mavericks team it doesn't bother me if it's low, because he's trading that off likely with some amazing 3-point shots. I mean, there was at one point during the playoffs last year where his effective field goal percentage was like in transition was like 96%. Because he was hitting like above 40% from 3 and then finishing at the rim at other opportunities. So like how many rim shots he takes is not, I just think he's sort of overstating a challenge where it's like, oh, well, if he's a little better at this, the Mavericks go from being, I don't know what offense they were last year to being a top 5 offense, something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you try to think about like, what can we do to be, like you said, what can we do to be better? He was already pretty great at a lot offensively. So yeah.
Well, my man Cowboy in the chat asked a little bit earlier. He said, like who's the best fast break facilitator on the team? The answer is Kyrie Irving. I mean, Luka is an incredible fast break player. That's like, he he's probably the best at it, but Kyrie's the one more willing to do it, if that makes sense.
Yes, I think so. I think I'd agree with that.
Well, who we got next?
Boy, I think there was. We got to talk about Dereck Lively, because I think if Mavericks fans weren't in love with this guy before,
I missed all of this part. I had like a 2-hour staff meeting, so this is all like I didn't see any of this.
It's nothing surprising. It's just more of him, being significantly more mature than a 20-year-old should ever have to be. Significantly more mature than I ever was as a 20-year-old. That's for damn sure. So obviously questions came up about how he's doing because, as most know, his mother tragically passed away right before the regular season ended. And he's been pretty open and honest about facing those questions and talking about it. And he was again today. Quote, "My mother was the main reason I was playing basketball for many years. So now it's about finding a new reason." Said his summer was filled with grief, as it was something, obviously he did come back after he took, a few weeks away from the team. He was hurt. And then the Mavericks never said he hurt his knee, I think, or his ankle. And the Mavericks said it wasn't that serious and he was out. And his absence, I think we noticed, he was like, why is he out? Because he seems to be okay on the sidelines. He's jumping around celebrating. And it was, then came out that his mother had passed away. And it was pretty clear he was dealing with that. And the Mavericks were letting him, stay away from playing in games. So that's, we've all dealt. I'm assuming most people we have dealt with loss. And that stuff doesn't go away after a month or two. It lingers. So he was being pretty open about that. That was a pretty harrowing quote. That was his mom being the reason he played basketball. Now he's got to find a new reason. But I just can't imagine what he's dealing with right now. So he was pretty open about that. Talked about his summer. He talked about owning the paint, learning what works for him, playing off 2 feet versus it. It's about focusing on the details. And really with this guy, if he's, with him, the sky's the limit. You could tell me any type of scenario and I would believe he could reach it. And with the work that he put in from the time he was drafted to opening night, excuse me, we saw that improvement from him, because remember, opening night started, we weren't even sure if this guy could set a screen properly. And within the first week, he was already rim running like he had been in the league for 5 years. So the way he's able to pick things up so fast, I'm just curious. I'm excited to see what what does another offseason look for him if one offseason did so much for him? Just curious to see how much he keeps improving.
Well, and beyond the fact that he's in the perfect role paired with Luka, I also think that this is a really perfect team for his both game development, but also him sort of growing up. I can't imagine. He had such a good rookie year. He could rest on his laurels, and I don't think anybody would really complain. But he seems to want to get better. And then the group of guys around him are so accomplished that they can sort of, if it were ever to be a thing, which I don't think it's not, it doesn't seem like his personality, but it's the right kind of guys to keep him grounded. And that's very, very interesting to me. It's one of those things that I wouldn't normally consider, but it's he gave a little, there was a podcast he was on, what's his name? The Maverick end of bench guy that I couldn't stand from
Theo.
Yeah, he was on Theo Penson's podcast and basically said some stuff about Rudy that I really wish he wouldn't. And then I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, well, he also didn't miss a shot against the Timberwolves. So I guess I understand why he's talking this talk. But I just when he gives quotes like he does today, he knows how to answer questions confidently. And he just seems to be just incredibly grounded in a way that I have a hard time wrapping my brain around just as a 40-year-old, because I'm not that level of grounded.
Too good to be true in a way.
Yeah, right. That's a great way to phrase it. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, but he's a real deal, man. It's amazing.
You don't find a lot of players picked he was technically 12th overall, but the Mavericks, traded their 10th pick. Anyone picked that high, basically in the lottery, You don't find a lot of those guys that from day one are like, yeah, I'm a role player. Like I'm ready to do role player things.
Yep.
Like guys taken in those ranges where the best player, like they've always been like the best player on their basketball team, like in junior high, high school, AAU, college, like that level. And then the transition from like, because when you're picked 10th, you might have expectations of being number one, maybe, but like once you get outside, like maybe the top 5, a lot of those guys picked, like there are other players better than you on that team. And that's a tough transition for a lot of these guys to handle. And I don't know if it was because Lively at Duke was also kind of like a role player, so to speak. But he's handled that transition better than almost any player. Like I'll never forget his draft night interview being like, yeah, I'm excited to like set screens and play defense. And I'm like, no one says that. Only second rounders say that, not guys picked 12th overall that just became millionaires for the rest of their lives for the most part. Like it's just crazy. And so like from that moment on, like that's why I said like nothing would surprise me. So like I'm excited to see what another offseason looks like with him. Working with Tyson Chandler as like a player development coach is always exciting. I'm glad that the Mavericks kind of mended things enough so that Tyson could stay within the org, because that's basically the perfect tutor for him. I'm excited to see what he does. I know people are excited about the 3-point shot.
That he's not taking any three.
I know
he kind of alludes to that, and that's okay. Like if he takes 30 this season, that's going to be kind of where my bar is. But where I'm interested in seeing him is if he gets to make any decisions off the pass, off that high screen and roll stuff. Like I hope teams send doubles at Luka. I hope they're insane, because I really want to see lively deal.
He was way better at that than he should have been last year. So what does he look like now? Like, do they trust him more to be more of a hub, dribble handoff stuff on the elbows? Like there's a lot they can open up if they feel confident in his ball handling, not in like a dribbling sense, but just like taking care of the ball when he touches it and making the right decision. Like there's still a lot to unlock there if they feel like he's put in the work, which by all accounts he probably has, because this guy's ridiculous.
Can't wait, man. Well, then we got one more person that you got some pulled some of their media day quotes, and PJ Washington. What did he have to say today?
Yeah, so we already talked about one, which I thought was kind of the theme of media day. That's why I included it when they said one word to describe the team, and he said versatile. Sky's the limit for the team. We're taking it one day at a time was his quote. We kind of already touched on that. The other thing I wanted to mention, which this isn't like unique to what he said. Like all media day across the league is just guys saying that they want to do more, and they worked all summer on their game and they want to expand things. But he did say he's focused on making plays at all 3 levels of the court, including bringing the ball up, setting plays up offensively. And the reason why I bring it up with him, even though that's kind of a cliche media day answer for a lot of guys, is that we were kind of wondering what happened to his game when he got to Dallas offensively. Excuse me, because when he was in Charlotte, his first 2 years, he was first 2.5, maybe first 3 years, he was a really talented, low-key, good offensive player. He had a good shot. He was above average from 3. He had a little bit of a mid-range game, had a little bit of a post game, kind of did a little jack of all trades in Charlotte. Obviously, he had that opportunity because that team stunk, but like he did some things with the ball offensively that his last season in Charlotte and then coming to the Mavericks, like that just sort of went away. Like his 3-point shot has been so down in a way that's like really weird. Like I don't know why his 3-point shot has fallen off over the last like 12 to 18 months that it has. And he doesn't really, the Mavericks didn't use him a lot of different ways. But of course, like they just traded him. So like he was learning a lot of stuff on the fly. And you would see glimpses, like remember we would see in the playoffs, they would kind of post him a little bit on switches.
Yep.
And that was interesting. Like there's more there, I think, with him. And he could be kind of key.
He's the guy where if you're saying who are we willing to give a shot up from, he's the guy. Because you go through the other starters that you've assumed that you've listed. You don't want to give up a free dunk to Lively. You don't want Luka to get a good shot. You don't want Kyrie to get a good shot. You don't want Klay to get a good shot. So that leaves Washington. And so Washington's development is probably the season X factor for me. He made some really bad plays in the finals. We're done. We got to the finals. It happened. But there was a couple of sequences. Like there was a turnover. God, what was it? Game 2, maybe game 3, where it was just like, dude, what are you doing? And so the shots with players like that come and go. I mean, I still think he needs LASIK. Like some of the shots that he misses are true. It's like he has a depth perception issue. I really mean that. But at the same time,
his
he also
form looks good.
Mm-hmm. And he's and like you mentioned, he has a history of offensive versatility. The floater is gorgeous. The handle sucked, but that's something that
they don't need him to handle.
No, but but you also want him to be able to attack confidently off the dribble. Right?
Yes, for sure.
So you know, if he improved any of these elements by a factor of 5, I don't know, don't want to give it a percentage, but if you assume he spent some time working on weaknesses which were obvious, and he's a guy who's still young and is capable of development, then there's just when I say X factor, I really mean like in terms of he might be the guy who helps determine how far the Mavericks go.
Yeah,
so
I would believe that. I would love to see them. Like the thing with me is just love to utilize his size a bit more. And we saw a little bit, like, remember when he had some post ups off switch, like when teams would, like, the Thunder put Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on him to try to hide Shai defensively, and PJ took him like right in the post and just kind of boxed him out and turned around and got a couple of layups. Can't remember which game it was, but
right,
like more stuff like that, and especially like, you know, the playoffs put a book on the Mavericks in terms of how to guard them pretty definitively, and it's something that we've been wondering why coaches don't do this more. Like when opposing coaches keep putting 2 on the ball on Luka or Kyrie, and we're like, what are you doing? Like, that's not how you guard this team. You need to guard them one-on-one or switch, and don't don't give these role players open lanes. Well, a counter to that, like if teams are going to switch on Luka, like let's say you run a pick and roll with PJ and Luka, and the team switches because they don't want to give up an open role player, because Luka's so good passing out of a double. That means theoretically a smaller player is guarding PJ. Get his ass to the block, give him the ball, let him do something with it. Like there could be a lot of fun opportunities for them with cross matches and switches using PJ's size, because he's not huge, but like he is capable of boxing someone out down low and sealing and scoring near the basket. Like he's got that in his bag, I think, and that'd be something cool that they could utilize a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And he's going to have ups and downs. He's just that kind of player, but he showed a lot. Like one of the questions coming into the Mavericks was, could he play defense? And the answer, I think that he answered that question quite resoundingly. He is capable of a lot on the defensive end. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him on both ends of the ball. And I've said that kind of about every single player we've talked tonight, because, if there was a season to be outwardly incredibly bullish about the Dallas Mavericks, it has to be this one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is this is the most talented team since 2011.
I mean, we were really excited about the 2019-20 team, but we didn't have incredibly lofty expectations because we didn't know how certain things were going to work. And then the Mavericks started the season 16-5. They just, Luka looked like an MVP candidate in his second year. And in terms of this is easily, by a margin, the most excited I have been for a Mavericks team, because every other season we have had, there's the COVID year. Like there's just so many odd things that have happened. That the Jason Kidd's first year, we kind of remember it with rose-colored glasses, but they played garbage basketball for 55 games. Like they started the season with 2 Dorian Finney-Smith post-ups, only for Kidd to find a Dwight Powell-based defensive scheme, and then they hustled to the playoffs and just sort of outworked everyone. This team, if they're able to carry if they're able to really bring some of the intensity that they brought over the last 20 games to the first 60 games of the year, I mean, the 55 wins is really up there for me. I'm really bullish on this team. And not only am I bullish because I believe in the talent, I also think it's what they need. Just because they've made the finals and the conference finals as a lower seed doesn't necessarily mean that's something that they should strive. Like, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. Like, they need to give themselves an easier path in the playoffs, in the 2025 playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing you mentioned earlier is it feels like this roster had, like, what they'd been doing in a lot of previous Luka years is like, okay, we got to get through these like minutes with these guys that should not be on the floor for a team that has aspirations of contending, like the Frank Ntilikina minutes and the Theo Penson minutes and the JaVale McGee minutes. And like, they had these stretches of games where it's like, okay, we got to make do with this two-way guy, or we got to make do with this undrafted guy, or we gotta hold down the fort with this guy. And like, you look at like the top 8, 9, 10 guys on this roster, and you're like, these are NBA players. Like, this isn't stuff that we need to scheme around to just make do. Like, this is like, oh wow, Quentin Grimes is your 9th man, maybe. Like, that's pretty awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah, like this guy was a top 7 rotation player for an Eastern Conference playoff team, like not that long ago. Like, that was playing big minutes back then. Like, it's just the depth all the way through in terms of guys that can play positive NBA minutes. Just feels like it's higher than it's ever been at any other point since Luka's been here.
And with that, I think we should close out kind of our Media Day podcast. I don't know what is in store for us the next couple of weeks, because, over at Mavs Moneyball, we've really started. While Josh has been away, I have been absolutely belligerently berating our writing staff to get stuff up, and they've answered the call. We got a lot of things scheduled the next. If you haven't been to the site in a couple of weeks, we started putting up like real stuff, not just like aggregations and like the occasional, oh, this is what somebody said, let's react to it. We have a whole weeks of previews, player previews up. We're going to have more stuff coming up tomorrow. I don't know if Isaac Appelt, who went to Media Day today, is going to write anything. Hope he does. But we're just really going to start having things out there. So visit Mavs Moneyball. And, normally how I use this time of the year for Josh and I is to flex our muscles a little bit and get used to putting stuff out there. But depending on Josh's availability, we'll see how it goes. I mean, I personally wouldn't mind if you and I were able to meet a little later this week just to kind of go through the player previews of the specific guys we've already written on. But I'm up in the air. We will get back in our groove. You're not lacking for Mavs content out there. But we have to sort of balance the season. If we're expecting to go to June again, Josh and I sort of have to. We can't burn ourselves. Like, you and I both have jobs where our fourth quarters are exceptionally difficult, and neither one of us wants to like be burned out by the Mavericks in December. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know what we'll do, but we'll do something, right?
Yeah, we'll do something. We always figure it out.
I'm just going to go ahead and say this. I am desperately trying to get my buddy. I mean, he's not my buddy, but I've known him for 10 years. Jason Concepcion to come on. And he said he would. He actually said, I will. So I'm hopeful that is a thing that would happen next week. I don't know if he actually will be able to follow through on that with all his obligations, but he's somebody that's been on my podcast bucket list for a very long time, just because he's such a, like, the things he is interested in are the things I am interested in. This also gives me one last opportunity, since we're just over an hour now, to ask a question which I know the answer to. Have you seen any of Andor yet?
Man, what are you talking? What do you think I've been doing? Like, I've not been on like a vacation the last.
I know you can't do it. I know. Well, I will ask you this though, because you do make movies a priority. Have you seen any movies lately?
Oh, okay. Have I seen movies? I saw the Beetlejuice sequel.
Oh,
which was fun. It was a great time. That's like low key. Megan, my wife,
Sure. I
loves
love
the
I love
original.
Beetlejuice as a kid.
Yeah, yeah. So she loved it, and it's it's just a good time. Like it's nothing like
Sure.
mind blowing, but like it was just cool to see that cast have a lot of fun with it, and it looked nice. Like
That's fun.
my bar is so low for movies now because I've been so like turned off by like just how visually movies look nowadays, especially like blockbusters, like just
Sure.
CGI stuff. Like if you just make a movie that looks nice, even if like the writing and the story doesn't make sense, like I will cut you a lot of slack. And like a lot of Beetlejuice was like in the screen, like it just felt nice to watch a movie like that again. That and then The Quiet Place, before things went to hell for me. The Quiet Place movie that came out, the prequel or whatever, which was shockingly good. Like,
Okay.
not like blockbuster good, like legitimately, earnestly,
Like a
like
film.
oh yes, a
Okay.
well-made movie. Like not anticipating that at all. But yeah, that was good as well.
So I have two for you, and this is largely because I parent an 8-year-old child. Transformers 1 ruled.
I'm so glad you had fun with that.
It
'cause I know
had
you're a
no
Transformers
business
guy.
being any good at all. But Brian Tyree Henry plays the guy who ends up being Megatron and just sort of power lifts the whole movie. And I was in it. I was explaining to Parker afterwards because it really does like some interesting like hero's journey stuff. And like, yeah, it's Transformers where the lore is like, if you were to try to explain it to a person who doesn't know what Transformers is, they're going to look at you like you're the dumbest person alive because it's robots in disguise. But it was shockingly entertaining. And the animation was really cool, which was not a thing. I don't really know enough about it, but
Yeah, the style looked pretty cool.
Style was really cool, and it moved like it was a tight 90 minutes, so that was great. And then the other one, and if I would say that Transformers 1 was like an 8.5 out of 10, The Wild Robot is a 10 out of 10, like a perfect children's movie in every sense of the word. Like I can't wait to see it again. If that makes sense. Like it was outstanding. And Parker and I talked about it after the movie, like getting him to kind of work through like I probably cried 3 times in a children's movie, like that element of things. But like talking to Parker about it afterwards was really neat because it was amazing. And also coming from one animated movie to another, very different animation style, which was really cool.
Yeah,
so
that's been really cool with these animated movies lately. It's like these studios are like really opening up. Like not everything looks like there was a stretch there where it was like everything looked like a Pixar or looked like Shrek or whatever. Or
that's right.
Those were the only styles of movies. DreamWorks face, if you've seen that meme, that's what every animated movie looked like. So it's cool to see this.
That's right.
I gotta ask you one question about Transformers though.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel? Because what's his face? Is this like the first thing you've seen that Optimus Prime isn't voiced by that guy?
He did a good job with it. Chris Hemsworth did a really good job with it. And I because they don't, that's kind of the premise of the movie. It's like, okay, these two people are becoming these two characters that you know, but they do a good job of basically being like, these aren't these characters now. Like they're very different. Like so that was kind of fun. The other thing, last thing I'll do is Parker and I finally finished an X-Men 92 watch, which was like, by the time you get to season 5, which was the one they kind of canceled halfway in the middle after 10 episodes, the animation and the story was so bad. I didn't know how to function. I was just trying to tell Parker, I'm like, buddy, we just got to get through this because it ends and then they pick up with X-Men 97. And then we go to X-Men 97, like almost immediately after. We've only watched 6 episodes, but I am baffled at how good it is. Like really incredible.
My friends have loved it.
It's 30-minute episodes. Like even if you're not like an X-Men person, which I kind of recommend becoming one just because that's probably going to be the next thing Marvel does. I was just very, very surprised. I can't wait to finish it if we ever find the time. And if my child stops getting in trouble, so we could, because that's the first thing my wife is. She's just like, no screen time. You're done. It's followed by go to your room.
Well, that's, yeah. I mean, that is awesome because like that shouldn't like, how is that a thing? Like that shouldn't exist, and not only should not exist, like it shouldn't be like. Why is this good? Like it's just kind of nuts. Like we're reviving this old 90s animated series and it's good. Like you should just be thankful that it exists, and then that it exists and it's also good is like that's pretty cool.
Well, I hear the baby screaming, which is weird because he's a good sleeper now. So I'm going to go take care of that. Josh and I will be back at some point. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, guys. We will talk soon. Everyone be good and go Mavs.